Good morning. It's Friday. We're going into one of the most important Sabbath, Shabbat days of the year. It's a day that we celebrate or commemorate because we don't celebrate death, but we commemorate the death of Sarah, the wife of Abraham. Now, this is done in a place called the Cave of the Patriarchs, or the Machpelah in Hebron. This is where supposedly all of the matriarchs and patriarchs were buried. Previous to the time of Herod, who was the builder of also renovated the temple and also built the actual cave of the patriarchs a couple thousand years ago, 1,000 something. According to Herod, this was built on the actual caves in which the bodies were buried. They used to bury in caves. So, is that true? Are they buried there? Are they not buried there? Or were they ever buried there? Of course, it says in the Bible that they were buried there, so therefore it's true. But the question is, this was a long time ago. So what happened since then to the time that Herod built the Cave of the Patriarchs monument, and the time that Israel and the IDF reconquered Hebron, and I and my friends are settled in Hebron. I've lived here for many, many, many years, almost a half a century. At any rate, let me read you a little bit of history of the place. Hold on, get my glasses on. Okay, the first item is, of course, the Cave of the Patriarchs. Now, the first time we actually have investigated this was in 1968, right after the 67 war. A 13-year-old, the name of Michal Arbel, who was the daughter of the Shin Bet operations in the West Bank, became the first Jew to enter the burial cave since ancient times. She was lured into a narrow 28-centimeter wide hole to gain access to the actual tomb, and she took photographs. Now, that was the first time that we actually had been down there in Jewish history. Now, we were wondering what's going on. So in 1981, when my friends and I had returned to Hebron, but the noted historian and archaeologist Noam Hebron, and Noam are known, and a bunch of us, a bunch of people, broke into the caves to see what was in the burial chambers, to take photographs. See, the truth is, we have no physical evidence that they were ever buried there. And we have to go down deep into the caves to determine exactly what's going on. So as far as the actual cave as we have it now, the floor of the cave has no indication that there's any remains of any people buried on the floor of the cave, which doesn't mean that that's not the place. That's far underneath, maybe another 50 or 60 meters. There are burial caves. But if they were ever in the actual access to the bottom of the caves over the last many, many years, over 1,000 years since Herod built it and opened it to the public, maybe people collected souvenirs, and that's why we found nothing when our representative Noam actually broke into it to see what was going on. So it remains to this day a mystery, a big mystery. At any rate, we will expect today many thousands and thousands of people that are making the pilgrimage to Hebron to commemorate the death of Sarah on Shabbat, on the Sabbath. and have been doing so for as long as anybody can remember, even when the place was under Ottoman control, under Crusader control, and even under Palestinian control. So it's revered by Christianity and Islam and Judaism. But like everything that's revered by everything, there is on and off violence in any of the sites, depending on who's in charge of security or depending on who is in charge of security. There's the incident of my dear friend, Dr. Barlow-Stein, who has been convicted for murdering a bunch of Muslims at prayer in the upper areas. I'll comment on this in more depth in another actual podcast during the celebration of the anniversary of this celebration. I wouldn't say celebration, you don't celebrate about dead people, but the remembrance of that incident in the future. Now, I would like to turn to another item. I think that's important before we finish this podcast. Something that's bothered me a lot. Now, recently, I think about 4 days ago, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, had said that Israel, the Israeli government, will offer $5 million reward for the return of each hostage alive that's being held by Hamas in the Gaza Strip. In addition, the family groups that will return the live hostages will receive for each hostage, of course, $5 million and total and complete immunity from further prosecution under Israeli law for any acts they may have committed during the war. Sound good? I think it sounds good. But we haven't had one single request to receive the reward. Not one single hostage has been released to us. And what does that mean? Well, obviously, we know that they sold some of the hostages into slavery to brothels in Egypt and other places. We know that some of them bought from the Hamas terrorists slaves who work in their houses. Some families in Gaza have purchased the survivors as slaves, also as breeders. But $5 million? You kidding me? And immunity from prosecution? I would think that at least one of these families would have come forward and says, yeah, okay, I'll take the $5 million, immunity of prosecution and relocation for the entire family to a safer area. But no one has showed up. What does that mean? Well, let's be real. I don't like to think about this, but we'll have to think about it. The likeliest possibility for anybody that's got any logical facilities left in their heads is that they aren't returning them because they're dead. That means there are no surviving hostages in Gaza. Sad, but probably true. Another issue that I'd like to deal with in this podcast is a decision by the International Court to have arrest warrants for Bibi Netanyahu, international arrest warrants for his arrest on the charges of mass murder, and also his former Secretary of defense. Arrested for mass murder under a court that is notoriously anti-Semitic. And of course, since this is the United Nations, obviously, well, they have issued arrest warrants against, of course, Netanyahu and Yoel. And although we call it total, complete, absolutely anti-Semitic propaganda bullshit, all of the signatories of the human rights people in wonderful human rights South Africa that actually decided to charge him are required by law to arrest him if he should go to any one of the other countries that are signatories. Interesting and irritating, but true. Now, latest news. Here's the latest news on the war with Israel. The death toll in Gaza is over 44,000 Muslims with over 104,000 injuries. Now, that's according to what the health officials have read. And the health officials, of course, work with Hamas. So take it more or less with a grain of salt. But there are two things that are of concern. One is the death of the citizens, so-called innocent civilians. Well, okay, what does that mean? These innocent civilians, and I think they are for the most part, are being held captive as human shields by the nuclear Hamas. Terrorists. I don't call them fighters. You hear in the news that they're called the Hamas fighters. No, they're not fighters. They're terrorists. They're not militants either. They're terrorists. They absolutely compel their own population to act as human shields under the penalty of instant death. So in order to get to them, well, we have to be the bad guys, don't we? It's a bad thing. We regret that. Every innocent civilian life we regret. We call on the world to make Hamas stop using civilian human shields. The other thing I see here in the news from this morning is Amos Hochstein, who's trying to broker a ceasefire in Lebanon, is meeting with the Israelis after his time, of course, in Lebanon to determine something that might stop the fighting there. We are continuing to strike back with our Air Force whenever they strike us with any of their missiles. It's almost tit for tat, tit for tat, tit for tat, tit for tat. Our land forces are still sanitizing a corridor of the Hezbollah's terrorist tunnels that were almost ready to go when the war started. They were going to do another thing that happened in Gaza, steal prisoners, murder men, women, and children, burn babies in microgol ovens like they did in Gaza, and to repeat the atrocity that for which ultimately Israel will be blamed because we're Jews. So essentially, the war goes on. And I really don't know how long it's going to go on for. My situation, of course, is very simple. I'm continuing to voluntarily, I don't get paid, patrol the fences at night and day. I do approximately 14 to 15 kilometers on foot with my faithful friend, Mayan. Actually, she's a good dog. She knows what's going on out there, and she warns me if there's anything unusual. I have plenty of time on my hand for walking the dog and putting myself in danger because the front lines in Judea and Samaria for us are our security fences. But I got plenty of time on my hand because I haven't worked for almost a year. I live off my savings. Of course, my Social Security can hardly cover things. I'm 77 years old, and my wife is 74 and ill. And the medical expenses and the daily living expenses are very difficult now that I don't have an extra income, which was at the time providing security for the Palestinian workers who work in Jewish communities. Interestingly enough, they don't work anymore. So one thing I have in common with the Palestinians in the area is neither one of us have any money or a job. So I guess everything is equal as class. Interesting change of affairs. I see so many soldiers going to war, being here in Hebron, so many 18 and 19-year-olds. And I remember, I think back on when I was 18 and I signed up for 6 years in the Marine Corps and spent all the time in Vietnam. And I look at them and I say, my God, was I that stupid? But I believe everything they told me. And the truth is, yes, we always do, 18 and 19. We believe everything they do. But the important thing in combat is not the politics. The important thing in combat is the person to the left and right and the front and behind. Because that is the reality of war. You survive, they survive, because you're brothers in arms. And that's how you win or lose a war. You win if you maintain the idea of brothers in arms. And that's not politics. It's not what are we fighting for. You know what we're fighting for? To survive and make sure the guy next to us survives. That's brothers in arms. So I don't know how much longer the war is going to go on. I've already seen 3 of my beloved grandsons seriously wounded. I pray every day for the safe return of the 63 members of my family besides me that are living in a war zone that could die at any moment. In the end, the only thing any of us can do is just place our souls in the hands of the creator of the universe, and if we have to, we just kiss our ass goodbye. So I guess that's pretty much for this update. I want to wish all of you Shabbat Shalom and Sabbath rest. And I don't care if you're Arabs or if you're Christians or if you're Jews or if you're atheists, or I don't care if you love us or hate us. You're all the same as we are, created in the image of the Creator. So I bless you all with Shabbat Shalom. May you all live long, prosper. So long for now from Israel.